Today we'll be looking at solving three-part inequalities. Our objectives will be to solve a three-part inequality and to write the answer in three ways. I do want to make sure that you understand we'll only be solving three-part inequalities symbolically. We will not be doing that graphically. So let's begin by solving a three-part inequality. By a three-part inequality, what I mean is you actually see an inequality here that has three pieces. You normally see one inequality symbol and it has a left side or a right side, but here I want you to notice you actually have three pieces. And please note that the inequality symbols do not have to match. Notice here in this one I have a less than here and a less than or equal to over here, so they do not have to match. I think the easiest way to decide what your steps would be to look at this as if this part to the left of that line did not even exist. As a matter of fact, put your hand over it if that would help you right now. And let's talk about what your steps would be if you had 4t minus 1 is less than or equal to 11. Because I think then you all would be able to tell me that we would want to add 1 to both sides. Well, it turns out that that's exactly what we're going to do. But now let's include all of it again, and what we're going to do is we'll add 1 to all three pieces. Normally I would say add 1 to both sides, but this time I'll say add 1 to all three pieces. So we're going to work this entire inequality together. When we do that, what we get is 6 is less than 4t, which is less than or equal to 12. And all I've done is add 1 to all three of these pieces. Once again, let's ignore this part over here for just a minute and tell me, if you only had 4t is less than or equal to 12, what would your next step be? Well, you should tell me that you would divide by 4. So once again, that's exactly what we're going to do, but we're going to do it to all three pieces. When we do that, we get 6 divided by 4 is less than 4t divided by 4 is less than or equal to 12 divided by 4. Let's simplify where we can and reduce any fractions that we can, and we end up with 3 halves is less than t, which is less than or equal to 3. At this point we have completed working a three-part inequality. We have a t in the center all by itself, and so that's where we're headed to. Let's talk now about how we would graph this on a number line and then write it in set builder and interval notation. Well, on a number line, this would be an interval of numbers that extend from 3 halves up to 3. It's the t's that are in between 3 halves and 3. Well, let me remind you for just a minute, what is 3 halves? That's just 1 1/2. So if I want to graph 1 1/2 on the number line, it would be right about here. Would it be a hollow circle or a solid circle? It would be hollow because it doesn't have an equal to with it. And then what about the 3? I would have a solid circle right there, and it would be all of the t's that are in between those two places. Let me remind you, that could have been written with a parentheses here and a bracket here. Now this time you'll notice your interval doesn't extend to infinity. It has 2 endpoints, but we've now graphed it. So let's continue then, and let's talk about how we write it in set builder notation. Well, it's just the set of all t's. Notice this time we simply use the letter t because that's the letter we're using. So it's a set of all t's such that, remember that's what that symbol says, such that, and then once again you just blop that whole thing in there. So it's 3 halves is less than t, which is less than or equal to 3. Writing the interval notation once you have the number line is pretty much a piece of cake. It's open parentheses, 3 halves, or if you wrote that as 1 1/2, that would be fine, comma, 3, and then notice that your parentheses and your brackets look exactly like they do on the number line. So it's open parentheses, 3 halves, comma, 3, close bracket. Let's do another one of these just for good measure. You may want to pause the video here and do this one on your own. I will tell you there's a little twist to it at the end that I'll talk to you about, but you should be able to make it most of the way through. If you're back now, let's pick up with our steps. We would first want to subtract 4 from all three pieces. That would give me a -1 is less than or equal to a negative x, or I wrote it here as a -1x because that will help us when we get to the next step, which is less than or equal to 16. Next, I want to divide all of these pieces by -1 so that I will end up with this x right here all by itself. So let's divide all three pieces by a -1. But please remember that anytime you divide an inequality by a negative number, the sense of the inequality changes. Well, here it changes in both of these inequalities because everything is divided by a -1. So you'll notice that now what we're going to have is a +1 is greater than or equal to x, which is greater than or equal to a -16. Now up until now, every time we've written a compound inequality that looks like this, it's always been in the form little number on the left, big number on the right, and both symbols are less than. Well, what we're going to do is we're actually going to turn this inequality around. Let me make sure you understand what I'm doing. If I had the inequality 7 is greater than x, you can rewrite that as x is less than 7. Let's think about that for just a minute. If 7 is greater than x, then x could be things like 5 or 6. Well, those same numbers would be less than 7. So you can literally turn that inequality around. Now, most of you don't have trouble with doing it here, but we're going to do the same thing right here. We're literally going to turn our inequality around. And when we do that, we'll have -16 is less than or equal to x, which is less than or equal to a +1. This will help you when you get ready to do your number line, your set builder notation, and your interval notation. So let's look now at the number line. Once again, this time I have the set of x's that are in between two numbers. This time it's a -16 with the equal to with it. You can think of it as the bracket. And over here on the other end we have a 1. Well, since my number line is counting by 2's, I'll need to pop that one right here in the center, and I can still do it with a bracket as well. Then it would be shaded in between right there. So that's what your number line would look like. Now let's write it in set builder notation. Well, it would be the set of all x's such that, and then once again you just put your answer in, so it would be -16 is less than or equal to x, which is less than or equal to 1. And now we want to write the interval notation. Well, if you look at your number line, you pretty much see it right there. It would be a bracket, -16, comma 1, close bracket. At this point, you should be able to solve a three-part inequality. So let me leave you with a thought for the day. A slip of the foot you may soon recover, but a slip of the tongue you may never get over. Watch what you say. I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.